Some people think a marriage of convenience is nothing more than a cold contract, without love. But what happens when living together turns into affection, when respect turns into desire, and when the roughest man on the ranch starts losing his way because of the girl he swore to keep at a distance? This story proves that sometimes love doesn't walk in through the front door. It quietly takes root and grows without asking permission. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and turn on the notification bell. It helps the channel grow and makes these stories reach even more hearts. The west wind swept through the eucalyptus trees like an old whistle, carrying fine dust and the warm scent of trampled grass. Logan Bennett's ranch seemed to grip the horizon with both hands. Straight fences, cattle resting quietly in the shade, a red barn that had seen better days, and a porch that creaked with every step as if the wood had its own opinion. Everything there spoke of endurance as a verb with deep roots. Logan, 38, with a day's stubble and eyes the shade of near metallic gray, pressed his hat down against his head and stared at the pasture the way a man stares down a judge. His shoulders belonged to someone who'd learned early that land is defended with work and silence. His silence belonged to someone who had lost everything he'd ever dared to call light. The memory of Clara, her laughter before her hands began to tremble, days too short, nights too long, the illness stealing words, then gestures, then everything, visited him like a cloud that never rained. It didn't thunder, but it always dimmed the day. He drew in a deep breath of hay and rust. His fingers brushed the pocket of his shirt. The small, cold gold wedding band lay there, tucked away like a stubborn secret. He didn't wear it on his finger anymore, but he couldn't bring himself to lock it away in a box either. Grief is manual labor, he thought. You move it, sort it, gather it, throw it out, and when you least expect it, you find a piece of it in your pocket. "Boss!" The voice came from behind, steady with respect in its tone. Sebastian Vale, the foreman, skin tanned by the sun, a trimmed mustache, eyes the shade of brown that had seen it all and still hadn't lost faith in the good. "The Bentleys are in the office again." Logan clenched his jaw the way you slam a gate shut. The Bentleys, two second cousins in pale suits, slippery smiles, and the sharp elegance of men who measured both land and people by the same ruler. Relatives. Yes. Family. No. "What do they want now?" Logan asked, voice low and coarse. "The usual. An omelet made from the eggs of your patients," Sebastian answered dryly. "Want me to send them packing?" "No." Logan adjusted his hat. "I'll talk to them." Sebastian nodded, and for a moment his eyes drifted toward the yard. On the far side, Lucy crossed with a large bucket, her steps light, her brown hair tied in a low ponytail that let a few soft strands escape near her neck. She was 21, though sometimes she looked younger when she bit her lip in concentration. And other times, like when she tilted her chin to say no, she looked older. She was sweet, yet not fragile, like a flower that had learned to grow in the wind. "She's getting the bottles for the calves' colostrum," Sebastian remarked casually, though pride leaked through. "That girl's got a surgeon's hand when it comes to animals." Logan didn't answer. He watched the clean quickness of her movements, the care with which she handled the bucket, the way she stepped around a loose nail as if she'd already measured the distance with her eyes. He turned his head a second too late. Lucy had already caught the look. In a reflex, almost shy, she lowered her gaze. Her steps quickened as if every grain of dirt in the yard had turned into an obstacle. A faint warmth climbed up her neck, coloring the delicate skin just beneath her ponytail, the kind of blush that comes fast but lingers. "Foolishness," he scolded himself. "She's his daughter, she's a girl, and I'm a man with a ghost in my pocket." The Bentleys filled the office the way termites fill cracks, silent and hungry. One of them, Andrew, wore a navy blue tie. The other, Michael, had a bright smile that never reached his eyes. "Logan." Andrew spread his arms as if to embrace him. He didn't. "Always a pleasure to see you." "It's mutual," Logan lied with the politeness of a man who has no time to waste. "What brings you here?" "Progress." Michael smiled, leaning against the desk as if it belonged to him. "We have an investor willing to take on the ranch's old debts, in exchange, of course, for a portion of the land, a fair portion." Logan's gaze went to the map pinned on the wall, the curves of the terrain etched like veins on paper. Fair portion. The kind of phrase that only comes from someone who's never woken at 4 in the morning to save a calf born too weak. Fair portion, he repeated slowly. How much? 60% to start, Andrew said, carrying the scent of an expensive cologne that didn't belong anywhere near dust. With reversion clauses if productivity rises. It's a solid starting point. My starting point, Logan replied, is that this place has an owner and it's not for sale. Michael's smile bent at the corner. You know your father's will ties things up, Logan. The clause is clear. Married, with a legal heir within 5 years of his, passing, or the property returns to the original family. 4 years have already passed, one left. Time doesn't stop. We are the original family. Your relatives, Logan corrected. And this land is not currency. Andrew spread his hands like a patient preacher. There doesn't have to be a fight. We could just sign the papers or… He let the sentence hang like bait on a hook. Resolve the clause. A legal marriage, an heir on the way, and everything stays as it is. Logan bit. The inside of his cheek. The air thinned. The word marriage had a metallic taste. The word heir came with an echo that wasn't just his own. He stepped forward, touched his fingers to the window, felt the cold glass. Memories are a tricky herd. When one horse bolts, the others follow. He turned his hard gaze on them both. Door, he said. You know where it is. Think about it. Michael murmured, dimming his own shine. Sometimes the hardest path isn't the best one. Sometimes the easiest path is the most cowardly, Logan shot back. When they left, the office seemed bigger and emptier. Logan sat, his fingers brushing the ring in his pocket. Marriage. One word can be an entire shelf of memories. I heard part of it. Sebastian's voice came from the doorway, followed by his hat appearing in the frame. Sorry, the door wasn't shut right. They use the law like a lasso, Logan said, and they want to break me with the tip of a pen. They want you to remember. That time is a bullet, Sebastian agreed, stepping inside. The clock's not on your side and, well, there's the clause. Old man Bennett with his stubborn head and his rules. Logan's breath was heavy in his chest. I'm not marrying like I'm signing a delivery receipt. No one's talking about a receipt, Sebastian said quietly, choosing his words like he was choosing wire to mend a fence. I'm talking strategy. I'm talking saving what's yours. And honestly, what belongs to a lot of people too. There are families depending on these wages. And there's the girl you saw this morning. Logan lifted his eyes, one eyebrow a sharp question. Lucy. Yeah. Sebastian leaned against the doorframe. I'm proposing a marriage of convenience. You and her. Straightforward on paper, clean in practice, separate rooms, respect all the way. You keep the land, buy time, and fulfill the damned clause. And we keep the Bentleys outside the gate. The silence between them snapped. The tick-tock of the wall clock grew louder, as if time itself were taunting them. Logan took a deep breath, but his expression didn't change. Marriage, he repeated, tasting the word like something sour. No, Sebastian, I'm not getting into that. It's the only way. Then lock the gate and hide the key. Logan cut in, his voice rough. I'd rather lose the land than pretend to have a life I don't. It doesn't have to be pretend. It's strategy. Strategy? He stepped closer, his gaze cold. I've lived beside someone sick, buried my wife, woken to a silence heavier than any storm. I'm not playing husband just to meet some clause in a will. That's not strategy. That's theater. It doesn't have to be, Sebastian countered steady. It could be a clean deal. A deal that ties someone to me out of obligation? Logan gave a humorless laugh. That's not clean. That's hitching two horses to the same rope and praying they don't kill each other. It's not just anyone, Sebastian said, his voice shifting to a firmer tone. It's Lucy. Logan froze, jaw still tight. And what's she got to do with this? Everything. Sebastian straightened. I haven't spoken to her yet, but I know my daughter. She respects you, sees you as a decent man. She's not blind to what you've been through. And she's not a child, Logan. She's a woman. She just doesn't like being yelled at, and she doesn't deserve it. Logan let the words settle. She respects you. Dangerous words for a man with a ghost in his pocket. What does one do with that? Keep it with the ring? Or throw it into the lake and pray it doesn't float back up? He cleared his throat, the sound rough. I don't know if I can... He stopped. The rest of the sentence was be fair to someone and to the memory of another at the same time. The rest of the sentence was also lie down and hear a different kind of silence. No one's asking you to rush, Sebastian said. I'm asking you for courage and calm, both at once. You can have that. Lucy rarely came by the office. She preferred the corral, the scent of salt in the feed, the sound of calves learning to take the bottle. But that late afternoon, the sun dropping like a sliced orange, she appeared at the door with a notebook pressed to her chest and her ponytail loose, the breeze undoing it into waves. She tapped lightly. May I? Her voice was clear, sweet, but not overly sugared. Logan looked up, and for a fleeting moment he saw someone else against the light of the window. Clara, in a floral dress, short hair, wide laughter. His heart made an old movement. He blinked and saw Lucy again. The clean skin, the blue of her eyes. No, were her eyes brown? No, they were a warm honey that sometimes seemed light. He'd never actually stopped to really look. He composed himself. Sebastian, still leaning on the doorframe, adjusted his hat, gave a brief nod, and slipped out in silence. You may, Logan said. Come in. She stepped inside with the careful air of someone entering a museum. Her eyes scanned the maps on the walls, the shelf with a few books, some on livestock, some on history, some on poetry no one needed to know about, and she set the notebook on the desk. You asked for the vaccination notes for Lot C, she said, more professional than you'd expect from a 21-year-old girl. And I brought them. Thank you, he replied. His handwriting had always been the kind that fought with the pen. Lucy's was calm, rounded, as neat as a well-stretched fence. Calves 12 and 19 are fine now, she pointed out, her short, clean fingernail marking the page. 23 is still fussy. I stayed with her later yesterday. Sometimes she takes the bottle better if you sing softly. Sing? His eyebrow lifted before he could stop it. Yes. The corners of her mouth curved into a smile that asked permission. Don't ask me why. But Moon River works, and can't help falling in love, go figure. I don't sing well, but they're not tough critics. He let out a short sound that could have been a laugh, if he remembered how to laugh without apologizing afterward. If it works, it's approved. A pause. Lucy. Yes? She stilled, her eyes meeting his, then retreating like someone testing the water's temperature. Your father made me a proposal. Logan spoke slowly, like a man choosing wood for a fire, wanting warmth, not a blaze. A marriage of convenience to hold this land against the Bentleys. Lucy blinked, surprised, the hand still holding the notebook pressed lightly against the cover. For a second, her eyes widened just a bit, and beneath her composure, there was a quick flicker of something like happiness. Not euphoria, but a shy warmth, the kind you keep to yourself, but that still manages to leak through your gaze. She wet her lips, measuring her voice. I didn't know. Logan nodded, serious. And there's no reason for you to accept without thinking. It's not simple. She lowered her eyes for a moment, as if searching for an answer on the floor. When she looked back at him, there was firmness there. If you think it's the right thing, I accept. If you think it's the right thing. The syllables fell on him like fine rain. Persistent, cool, honest. Lucy. He rubbed the back of his neck as if dust had settled there. I respect you. Deeply. You are useful. The word came out. Wrong, and he corrected it. Important, and I don't intend. He searched for the right phrase. I don't intend to cross your boundaries. I know, she said without hesitation. It wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. You're not the kind of man who invades. You're the kind of man who builds. Fences, yes, but also shade for others to rest under. Logan looked at her. Now that was a compliment. One worth keeping in a better pocket than the one holding the ring. It's going to be different, he said finally. We'll have rules. Separate rooms, clear schedule, no confusion, and honesty. If at any point this harms you, you say so. I'll stop. And if it's good for me? She asked, a brief smile breaking across her face like sunlight through a cloud. He turned his gaze to the window, to the fields he knew how to read better than people. A hummingbird hovered near the vine, stubborn against the wind. If it's good for you, he answered seriously. We talked before. Taking any step, and we name everything. No lies. She bit her lip, holding back the small smile, but her eyes, those betrayed something else. the old brightness of someone who, for years, had wanted to be seen not as a girl, but as a young woman. "So," she smoothed the notebook's edge, "will you accept?" He looked at his own hands. Marked, strong, the kind of hands that had always worked more than they'd spoken. He thought of his father, hard in his will, harder still with Clara, so, light before everything turned heavy, and of Lucy, here, steady, whole, offering not a shortcut but a bridge. "I will," he said simply. "If you will." "I will," she replied without blinking. The silence that followed wasn't the silence from before. It had texture, it had promise, and fear too, because everything worth having carries a thread of fear inside it. Logan felt the ring in his pocket, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't hurt the same way. "Let's go talk to your father," he said, rising to his feet. "Now." Her eyes widened and a laugh almost escaped her. "Now," he confirmed, "before the Bentleys come back with another paper." Sebastian was in the shed, checking the tools like a man reciting the rosary of useful things. When he saw the two of them, he straightened, but kept his expression neutral. Experienced, he wasn't about to celebrate a victory too soon. "Well?" he asked. "We're going to do it," Logan said, "but our way. Clean. With rules. I don't want Lucy to feel," he searched for the word again, "pressured to be anything other than herself. And I want a contract between the three of us, in addition to the civil one. Clear, simple, 6 months of evaluation. If the situation resolves before then, we end it without drama. If not, we decide together on the next steps. No one becomes anyone's prisoner." Sebastian took a slow breath, relief settling in his shoulders, though he didn't let it show in a smile. "Deal," he, said. "I know both of you. I respect both of you. It'll work, even if it takes a while to feel right. And one more thing," Logan added, looking at Lucy. "I want your mother involved in everything. She's your mother, and she's family. He hesitated, honesty demanding courage. "I don't have a mother-in-law anymore. Maybe I need to relearn how to be a son-in-law, even if—" He let out a short cough of a laugh. "Even if on paper this is just for show." Lucy's eyes lit up like a warm lamp. "She'll like hearing that," she said. "And don't worry, she makes a corn cake that could convert an atheist." "I'm no atheist," Logan replied flatly, though his lips gave just a fraction. "I just haven't been saying many prayers lately. Maybe it's time to start talking to someone besides the wind again." Sebastian adjusted his hat once more, this time to hide the glint in his eyes. "Tomorrow morning then," he concluded. "We'll go to town, handle the civil papers, come back, and bake that corn cake Helena makes. And the Bentleys, well, the Bentleys can choke on it." "Tomorrow morning," Logan confirmed. Night fell without fuss, but with the honesty of country nights. A wide sky, stars like distant beacons, crickets turning the darkness into a woven fabric. On the porch, Logan stood for a while. He didn't count. Lucy passed by with a mug of tea and hesitated. He noticed, and in the rare impulse of a man tired of missing opportunities, he said, "Lucy." She stopped, mug in both hands, steam rising like a secret. "Yes, thank you." "For what?" she asked, genuinely not knowing. He searched for the words and this time found them. "For reminding me that courage and calm can walk hand in hand." She nodded, her eyes shining like the water in the trough when the moon visits. Then she went down the steps, heading toward the smaller house a few yards away, where Sebastian and Helena waited. Logan stayed. He took the ring from his pocket. The night looked back at him. He ran his thumb over the gold, felt its cold turn warm. He didn't say goodbye. He said stay in another way. He placed the ring in a small envelope inside the drawer, alongside a photograph of Clara smiling, and another of a colt born 3 springs ago. Memory is not a rival of the future. It's a tool if you know how to use it. When he shut the drawer, the wind had shifted. It carried now the simple scent of corn cake from Sebastian's house. Logan lowered. His hat and the stars seemed to draw closer. Tomorrow there would be paper and ink. Today, there was promise. And between the two, there was a woman with steady hands and a voice that calmed calves. There was a man who, after a long time, had decided not to miss the next chance. The ranch breathed with him, and for the first time in 4 years, the silence felt lighter. Lucy woke before the sun, not because she had to, but because sleep hadn't lingered with her that night. She lay, there staring at the low ceiling of her room, feeling her heart beat as if it were in a hurry to reach the next day before she did. The marriage would be one of convenience. She knew it. Her father had made that clear, and Logan had reinforced it. But the simple fact of being able to live under the same roof as him felt like a beautiful secret she could hardly keep to herself. In the corner of the dresser, the light blue dress chosen for the trip to town was already hanging. It wasn't new, but Helena had hemmed it and stitched a bit of lace along the sleeves. Lucy smiled. It wasn't a wedding dress. It was a dress for an agreement. Still, in her imagination, it carried the sweet weight of a beginning. She closed her eyes for a moment and let her mind wander. She pictured the hallway of the big house, the scent of polished wood, the wide kitchen where he sometimes stopped for coffee without saying good morning, and herself there, able to prepare his cup before he asked. Small things. Simple. But for Lucy, they held the strength of a dream kept for years. The kitchen still smelled of fresh bread when Helena walked in, drying her hands on her apron. She found her daughter sitting at the table, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly with a spoon, a shy smile playing on her lips. "Looks like someone woke up early," Helena remarked, in that voice that could comfort and prod at the same time. "Don't tell me it's nerves." Lucy lifted her eyes, her smile growing a little. "Maybe it is." Helena sat across from her, resting her arms on the table. "I know what's going through your head, Lucy." "You do?" Her voice came out soft, almost conspiratorial. "I do." Helena leaned in slightly, studying her daughter's expression. "You're happy, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to remember, this is an arrangement. It's to protect the land, not to live a romance." Lucy lowered her gaze to the mug, slowly turning it between her hands. "I know, Mom, I understand. It's Logan." Helena took a deep breath. "It's precisely because it's him that you need to be careful. Logan is a good man, but he carries a pain you don't yet understand. He's going to keep his distance. It's not because he doesn't like you, it's because that's who he is." Lucy lifted her eyes, and there was a gleam there, a mix of stubbornness and hope. "Maybe he'll change." "Maybe." Helena gave a faint smile. "But if he changes, let it be. Because he wanted to, not because you expected it. You deserve to be cherished for who you are, not out of convenience." Lucy took a deep breath, as if accepting the advice, but inside she kept the right to go on dreaming. After all, she didn't want a quick gesture. She wanted the day-to-day, the time, the chance to show him she was no longer the girl he once knew. "I promise to be careful," she said sincerely, "but I also promise not to waste the chance to be by his side." Helena touched her daughter's hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. Then it settled. "Just don't forget, your heart is worth more than any land." The trip to town was silent, like almost every trip Lucy had taken with Logan. He drove with his back straight, hat tilted slightly forward, eyes fixed on the dirt road winding between the fields. Sebastian sat in the back seat, watching through the window as if keeping guard over every tree they passed. Lucy, seated beside Logan, kept her hands folded in her lap. Every so often, the wind slipped in through the window, tossing a few loose strands of her hair. She felt the urge to smooth them quickly but didn't move. She didn't want to draw attention to herself. He seemed so unaware of her, so focused on the wheel, that every word from his mouth felt weighted. "Did you sleep well?" he asked suddenly, without taking his eyes off the road. "I did," she replied, trying to sound calm but feeling the heat rise to her face. "And you?" "Enough." He went back to silence as if the conversation had served its purpose. Lucy didn't mind. To her, even Logan's pauses had value. The notary's office smelled of paper and old furniture. Light streaming through the tall windows caught dust motes drifting in the air. They signed the documents, listened to the formal instructions, and when the clerk declared the process complete, Lucy glanced at Logan. He only nodded, a simple gesture that to her felt almost solemn. There was no kiss, no exchange of vows beyond what they had already said back in the ranch office. But when he took the paper and carefully tucked it into the folder, Lucy felt as if it were a silent vow that, in some way, they were bound. Back at the ranch, the afternoon was stretching out. Lucy climbed the small steps to the porch of the big house with measured steps. Logan opened the door and gestured for her to enter. "Your room is the last one down the hall to the left," he said, his voice practical, almost professional. "I've put in a few things I thought you might need. If anything's missing, let me know." "Thank you," she said, glancing around. The living room carried a faint scent of wood and a worn rug that seemed to hold its own stories. "Tomorrow morning we start the routine," he continued. "You don't need to worry about the vaccines. Sebastian will oversee them. You can arrange your work however you like." Lucy nodded, feeling at once welcomed and held at arm's length. He wasn't cold, but there was an invisible wall between them, a wall she was willing to climb, brick by brick. The room that was now hers had a wide window with a view of the fields. Setting her small suitcase on the bed, Lucy let her hand glide over the clean sheets, imagining how many mornings she would wake up there. Deep down, she knew the agreement had its boundaries, but for her, being in the big house meant being closer to the man she had admired for as long as she could remember. In the living room, Logan spent a few minutes organizing papers on the desk. Every so often, he heard light footsteps in the hallway and found himself pausing, without realizing it, until the sound faded. When night fell, they had dinner together in the kitchen. It was simple, soup and fresh bread. They spoke little. Lucy asked about the milking. Logan spoke of the weather and the chance of rain. Ordinary words, but to her, each one carried a meaning he couldn't have guessed. Later, in the hallway, Lucy stopped in front of his door. She thought about saying goodnight but hesitated. Before she could decide, the door opened, and Logan appeared, holding a book. "Good night, Lucy," he said with a short nod. "Good night," she replied, her heart racing just at the sound of her name in his voice. He stepped inside, closed the door, and the silence returned. Lucy stood there for a second, smiling to herself, before heading to her own room. Lying in bed, she stared at the ceiling and let herself dream. Not of kisses or promises, not yet, but of the possibility that, in the day-to-day, between one talk about cattle and another about rain, Logan might come to see her not just as the foreman's daughter, but as a woman. And so, in the quiet darkness of the big house, the silent agreement that bound them began to take on life in the spaces between words and in the looks still yet to come. The morning was born with the smell of strong coffee and damp firewood. On the iron stove, the kettle rattled, and the steam made a thin veil before the window. Lucy had been up before the first rooster crowed and had already swept the porch, changed the water in the flowers vase, and left 2 loaves of bread rising like 2 discreet promises. Logan entered the kitchen with his usual gait, heavy and precise. He carried his hat in one hand and wore a jacket dusted with the road. He paused for a moment, noticing the bread covered with a ghee cloth, the skillet with eggs ready, the table set with 2 plates. "You didn't have to get up so early," he said in a low voice, still rough from sleep. "I did," Lucy smiled, turning her face toward the stove. "Bread doesn't wait, and neither do the cattle." "I can handle the cattle," he said, picking up the mug and filling it with black coffee. "The smell of that bread, I'm not so sure." "It's just flour and patience," she smiled. "The patience I borrowed from you. I hope you don't mind." He raised one eyebrow slightly, as if that were bold enough for this hour. He drank a sip, leaned his hip against the counter. The aroma of coffee, of bread rising, of polished wood, and underneath it all, a faint scent of lemongrass soap that seemed to have chosen the kitchen to live in. He didn't comment. He noticed and kept it. "Was anything missing in the room?" he asked. "Practical. Just a hook to hang my coat," she said, "and a small shelf for books. I didn't bring many. Sebastian will take care of the hook. The shelf I'll make," he replied, already picturing the board, the level, the screws. Lucy set the eggs on his plate, her fingers steady so they wouldn't tremble. He thanked her with a small nod. They ate almost in silence, as if respecting the work of the food before the conversation. "Today we need to separate the south lot," Logan said, rinsing the mug and setting it in the rack. "Some calves are crossing the fence and messing with the handling. I'll go with you," she said. "No," he answered automatically. "The ground's slick after the rain. Sebastian and I can manage." "I don't slip that easily," she countered gently. "And I rope calves better than I sing." He looked at her, weighing her words. The no stayed stuck somewhere between his throat and his tongue. Finally, he nodded. "Put your boots on, and no heroics. Just flour and patience," she repeated, smiling with her eyes. In the corral, the air smelled of leather, mud, and the waking sun. The cattle moved in slow waves, the deep lowing setting the work's rhythm. Sebastian was already there, gloves on his hands, his short smile in place. "Morning, girl," he said, proud in a way that fit entirely into one word. "Morning, Dad," Lucy replied, tying her hair into a higher ponytail. Logan gave quick instructions, the way he always preferred, clear, without flourish. Lucy listened closely, nodding. When the first calf bolted, she was quick. The rope landed on the first try, not like in the rodeos, but with the efficiency of someone who knew the animal's weight, the reach of her arm, and the firmness of the ground. Logan followed in silence, and a shadow of approval flickered behind his eyes. "Didn't I tell you?" Sebastian remarked, more to the air than to anyone in particular. "Surgeon's hands." "Steady hands," Logan corrected. "And a good eye." Lucy pretended not to hear, but the compliment found its place in her chest, like a nail driven into wood exactly where it belongs. In the middle of the sorting, the unexpected, a stubborn young heifer, newly weaned, tried to slip between Lucy's legs. She reacted on instinct, slipped, and went down. Logan's hat fell from the post where it hung, and in 2 strides he was there, catching her by the forearm before the animal could trample her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his tone sharper than usual. "I am," she said, her face speckled lightly with mud. "It's just my pride that fell off the fence." He let out a short laugh that seemed to surprise even him. "Happens to anyone who works," he said, pulling a handkerchief from his pocket. "Here." She wiped her cheek, and the cloth was left with a light brown streak, and with his scent, leather, saddle soap, the scent of a man who spent his days on the land. Lucy kept the handkerchief without realizing she was also keeping that scent. "It's just mud," she said. "Mud comes off with water. Not always," he returned without thinking. The words hung in the air, carrying far too many meanings for a morning. Later, the dust of the road brought news. A gray car stopped near the gate, and 2 familiar men in light suits stepped out, Andrew and Michael Bentley. A third, shorter man carried a black briefcase. Logan wiped his hands on his pants, his whole body already in a defensive stance. Lucy instinctively drew back behind the fence, but she stayed. She wanted to hear. Sebastian approached, brim of his hat low, the posture of a man who didn't yield ground easily. "Gentlemen," Andrew greeted with a smile that never reached his eyes, "we've received some troubling news. There's been irregular cattle movement in the South Lot. Risk of a drop in productivity." "Interesting news considering the South Lot answers only to me," Logan said, "and I just finished sorting calves to improve productivity. We have a court officer." Michael gestured to the man with the briefcase. A notification regarding the fulfillment of the will's clause. A reminder, time is running. The man with the briefcase held out the envelope. Logan didn't take it. "Leave it with Sebastian," he said evenly. "He'll file it." "This document isn't an invitation," Andrew kept the smile. "It's a warning." "Warning received," Logan replied. "Deliver it to the proper department." "The trash." Michael chuckled through his nose. "Always poetic, but poetry doesn't pay taxes. We'll be back, Logan, perhaps with more instruments." They left, kicking up dust. Lucy felt a small chill along her back and thought for a second that the world always found a way into what we tried to keep simple. Logan stood still until the car disappeared. "They know," Sebastian said quietly. "They know you're buying time. Let them know." Logan tucked the envelope away without looking at it. "Time is what I have to work with, and work is what I know how to do." He turned his head and his gaze met Lucy's for a brief moment. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The weeks passed at the ranch's pace, measured, demanding, honest. Lucy split her time between the big house and the corral. In the mornings, the kitchen carried the scent of coffee and the discreet whistle of the kettle. In the afternoons, the sun found its way through the barn's wooden boards. At night, the house breathed like a tired animal, satisfied to have made it through another day. There were many. Short conversations, but constant ones. "The bread yesterday was better than today's," Logan remarked, glancing at the crust. "Yesterday's flour was cooler," Lucy replied, "and I needed it less. Today's dough was impatient." "Impatience makes for poor texture," he observed, looking at her and for a moment seeming to speak of something else. Another day, standing by the sink, Lucy was washing a baking dish when he came in. his hands black with grease from the tractor's maintenance. "That comes off with hot water and patience," she said, pointing to his hands. "Neither of which is my specialty," he replied flatly, holding his hands out. "Show me." She held his fingers under the faucet. The water ran warm, and the foam carried a scent of lemon and something floral that seemed to have settled on his wrists to stay. Logan noticed the lightness of her touch, the unforced care, the way of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. He noticed and stepped back half a pace, remembering the invisible rules that held up the house. "Thank you," he said, drying his hands. "Now I can fight with the tractor on equal terms." "Don't fight. Talk," she smiled. "Machines are like stubborn calves. They respond better when you don't try to win by yelling." He nodded, and the words lodged somewhere in his mind. There were awkward moments too, the kind fate likes to invent. One drizzly afternoon, Lucy was hanging sheets near the stove to finish drying when Logan walked in with a bundle of bills in hand. She tried to pull down a sheet that blocked the way. The fabric came all at once and dropped over his head. For 2 seconds, Logan was blind, arms raised, and Lucy, hurrying, stepped toward him, bumping into the solid wall of his chest. "Sorry," she laughed without meaning to, trying to free him from the sheet. "It's fine," he said, far too serious for the situation, which only made it worse. "Domestic ambush." "It wasn't on purpose," she replied, blushing, still wrestling with the fabric. "The sheet decided you needed shade." "The sir again," he noted, and his voice came out softer than he intended. "It's Logan. We share a roof. No need for so many steps between us." Lucy nodded, lowering her eyes. Logan. Her saying his name seemed to land in exactly the right place and stay there. At night, on the porch, they sometimes crossed paths. Lucy would sometimes embroider, sometimes read a poetry book she would never admit to him. Logan sanded a board for the shelf he had promised her. The silence between them began to change its nature. It stopped being a skittish creature and started acting like a guard dog, always there, present, but no longer biting. "You like to read?" he asked without looking at her. "I do," she answered, marking her page with a ribbon. "Poetry and veterinary science, which makes for a strange mix." "Strange, but useful," he remarked. "Poetry lifts the head. Veterinary work lifts the calf." "And what lifts a man?" she ventured. He thought for a moment. "Work. Sometimes prayer. Almost always silence. And bread," she added. He held back a smile. "And bread." She dared another question. "Do you miss her?" He spent a while looking at the board in his hands. "I do," he answered plainly. "Missing is a place that never shuts its door. You just learn to live with the draft. And I can open the windows when the wind gets too strong," Lucy said simply, asking for nothing in return. He set the sandpaper down. He didn't promise anything, didn't refuse anything. He let her words stay there on the porch like just another chair. Her conversations with Helena at night were another kind of shelter. "Mom, today he just called me Lucy," she said, smiling as she folded one of the towels. Without that distant tone, just my name, for real. "That's a step," Helena smiled, pinning up her hair. "But it's not the last, not even close to the last." "I know." Lucy rested her chin on her mother's shoulder for a second. "I don't want to rush. I just want to be nearby when he learns to walk this road. Grief's roads have potholes," Helena warned gently. "And sometimes a person goes back to look at the old house before moving on. You hold the lantern, you don't push." "I'll hold it," Lucy promised. "And I'll make bread for when he gets tired." Helena laughed softly. "Bread helps, but it doesn't do everything. You're good, my daughter. Just don't let anyone mistake your kindness for invisibility." Lucy tucked the phrase away like a family heirloom. The Bentleys didn't disappear. On a bright Saturday, the gray car returned, this time without an officer, but with a man carrying a measuring tape checking the distance from the fence to the creek. "Surveying?" Logan asked, walking up with his hands in his pockets. "Prevention," Andrew replied. "We're mapping areas of common interest. Nothing invasive." "You call common. What belongs to me?" Logan said evenly. "Your semantics are creative. The law is straightforward," Michael returned, "and the deadline's shorter every day. The law also provides for respect of possession," Logan countered, "and for good faith. 2 words you use less than you wear ties." Andrew tilted his head like a man appreciating a good fencing strike. Married yet? I am, Logan replied without budging. And? Michael raised his eyebrows. And nothing more, he cut in. Now, if you don't mind, I have a lot to vaccinate, and you have a gate to cross in the direction of the road. They left, the man with the measuring tape trailing behind like a dog called in without supper. Lucy watched from a distance, her heart proud and wary. Proud for him, wary of them. Some things began slipping into Logan's mind through the back door. The scent of Lucy's soap on the napkins because she folded them while her hands were still damp. The light sound of her steps in the hallway, which he began to recognize by rhythm alone. The way she whistled softly, "You are my sunshine," when washing dishes, without even noticing. Her whistle straight and true as a taut line. Sometimes when he walked into the kitchen and didn't see her, he could still feel the faint trail of vanilla she left in the air, and it unsettled him for a few seconds. It wasn't love, it was a reorganization of the senses, a house shifting its furniture. One night, he was in the office going over numbers when Lucy came in to leave a plate with 2 slices of cornbread and a note. If the numbers are bitter, this helps. He read it, looked at the plate, and for a moment didn't know where to rest his hands. He ate 1 slice, then the other. The sugar seemed measured just right to talk to the accounts. "Thank you," he wrote back on the reverse of her note and left it on the kitchen table. The next day, he found the same paper with a drawn arrow and a shy, "You're welcome." He laughed to himself. There was also a long afternoon of fence repair when the two of them were alone, half a mile from the house. The sun spilled pale gold over the grass. Lucy held the posts while he fastened the wire. At one point, her glove tore across the palm. "Let me see," he said. She held out her hand, a thin cut, like paper gone mean. He took his canteen, poured water over it, and blew on it, an old reflex from someone who'd cared for another for a long time. "It stings," she said, laughing briefly. "Better it stings for 5 minutes than festers for 7 days, he replied. From his pocket, he took a strip of gauze and wrapped it securely. His fingers were large, but they knew how to be precise. When he was done, he realized he was standing too close. Lucy's scent was clean and understated, like clothes dried in the sun and a crushed leaf between fingers. He stepped back, as if correcting a compass. "Thank you," she said, looking at the bandaged hand. "It'll make me look braver than I am." "Brave isn't the one who doesn't feel," he said, fastening the wire. "It's the one who keeps going despite feeling." She stayed quiet for a moment, absorbing the words the way one absorbs the heat from a stone at the end of the day. "And do you keep going?" she ventured. "Every day," he answered, one step after another, sometimes 2 back. "Still, I keep going. Then I'll go too," slipped out before she could think. She blushed. I'll keep pace, in whatever's needed." He looked at her, weighing the words he wouldn't say. "In whatever's needed," he confirmed, returning his focus to the work. Living side by side gradually did what laws and clauses never could. It narrowed the distance. It didn't become intimacy, but it carved something between them that could be recognized by touch. At the table, they began sharing small comments. She about a cow that insisted on drinking in the wrong spot. He about a supplier who swore he'd deliver and never did. In the hallway, a "Good night, Lucy" turned into "Rest well," and the "thank you" that used to be a nod became a word, spoken in full. Helena observed with the patience of someone who knows the time it takes for crops to grow. "He's learning your habits," she told her daughter one afternoon, while they mended a dish towel together. "That comes before learning your heart." "I just want him not to have to be afraid of me," Lucy replied, her eyes bright. "Without drama. I'm not a storm." "No one is a storm all the time," Helena smiled. "But even good rain can startle when it falls too suddenly. Go drop by drop, my daughter." Lucy nodded. And that night she left a candle burning on the windowsill in the living room. A small light that said nothing to anyone, but to her meant someone's awake here. Logan saw it as he passed through the hallway. He stopped, looked at the flame, pressed the ring in his pocket for a moment, not to compare, but to remember who he had been and who he was. Then he went to the kitchen, took the cloth and covered the bread that was rising. He didn't say good night. He said, "See you tomorrow," which in the language of the right things can mean the same but without wounding. Before sleeping, he opened his bedroom window and breathed in the countryside, the scent of wet grass, of freshly stored leather, of thin smoke drifting from some distant fire. And in the hallway, the faint trace of Lucy's soap. A house has voices. Sometimes the quietest ones last the longest. Lying in bed, he still saw the stubborn calf, the torn glove, the sheet falling over his head, the laugh that escaped, his name spoken without, "Sir," the note with the arrow. It wasn't love. It was arrangement. Like finally deciding which drawer should hold the keys. Outside, the crickets went on with their work of stitching the night together. On the porch, the candle went out on its own, after completing its shift. And in the big house, 2 doors remained closed. For respect, for agreement, for care. But the distance between them, measured in steps, was already smaller than the week before. And for both, that was novelty enough to sleep on. Life on the ranch had its own rhythm. The sun climbed slowly. The well water came up cold in the morning, and dust made its home in the boots. But what had once been solid routine for Logan, a man of fixed habits, few words, and a sorrow that slept in his pocket, was now beginning to show fine cracks, almost imperceptible. They had a name, Lucy. He didn't know exactly when he started noticing. Maybe when she walked into the kitchen with her hair in a messy bun, loose strands dancing around her face. Or when she cut her finger trying to peel a squash and said, "It's nothing," before the blood even appeared. Maybe it was that night she came in wearing a simple raw cotton dress and the scent of rosemary on her wrists. But what he did know was that things inside him were no longer in the same place. Lucy, on the other hand, felt it. Every gesture, every distracted glance he threw her way and pulled back too quickly. Every time his voice dropped without him noticing, or when he called her out to the porch to deal with some trivial matter, just to have company while pretending to watch the weather, as if the clouds could say more than he could. She wasn't fooled. This was a marriage of convenience. But she also didn't deny her own heart the right to dream of something that, even if it never came to be, gave her life. The nights were the most dangerous part. That was when the floorboards of the big house creaked differently, when the silence between them felt heavier, when the walls seemed to hear more than they should. On one of those nights, Lucy was finishing drying the dishes. The smell of stew still lingered in the air, and the warmth from the stove pressed gently against her back, as if to tell her she belonged there. She was about to turn off the kitchen lights and head to her room when she heard heavy steps on the wooden floor. Logan appeared in the doorway, his shirt slightly open and his gaze tired but attentive. "I thought you'd gone to bed already," he said, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. "I was just finishing up in here," she replied, not hiding the slight smile that bloomed at his presence. "The house is shining. Almost looks like there's going to be a party. I just like to make everything feel like home," she said, adjusting a cup in the dish rack. "A pretty place makes you breathe easier, don't you think?" He made a low sound in his throat. It wasn't exactly a laugh, but it wasn't disdain either. It was something warm, almost intimate. "Made tea?" "I did." She took out 2 cups. He hesitated for a second, then stepped in. They sat at the table. The steam from the tea rose slowly, filling the space as if it respected the silence between them. "You cook like someone who cares," he said, watching the amber color of the tea. "Maybe because I do care," she answered, pouring for him. He took a sip and set the cup down more slowly than usual. "I've been noticing too many things lately." She lowered her eyes, but her heart stood upright. The following afternoon, at the smaller house, Helena came back from the sewing shed, tired but with her watchful gaze intact. Before opening the kitchen door, she caught the smell of sautéed onions and dough baking in the oven. She stepped inside to find Lucy chopping parsley, the radio playing softly, a song from another time filling the air with gentleness. "I can see you daydreaming again," she said, removing the scarf from her head and setting her bag on the chair. Lucy laughed without denying it. "He liked the baked rice yesterday, said he didn't like cheese but went back for seconds twice." Helena raised an eyebrow. "Since when does a man go back for something he doesn't like?" Lucy smiled, eyes on the plate where she was chopping parsley. "I know it's all for show, Mama, but sometimes it doesn't feel like it." Helena pulled out a chair and sat down with a sigh. "You're growing more than you should in such a short time, daughter." Is that wrong? No, but it's dangerous. I've always loved him, Mama, since I was a girl. But now, it's different. It's not just admiration. It's wanting to take care of him, to be near him. And sometimes I think he might like me too. Helena reached out and touched her daughter's hand. Maybe he does. But you have to remember that liking isn't love, and his timing is different. His mind comes from far away, and from a wounded place. Lucy nodded, eyes lowered. But it's not wrong to want to be seen, is it? No. What's wrong is forgetting who you are just because someone takes too long to notice. The days went on like water slipping between stones. Quiet, persistent. Lucy cooked, cleaned, ironed, tended cattle alongside her father, went into town for supplies, swept the porch of the big house at dawn. At night, she bathed, tied up her hair, and sometimes went into the kitchen or sat on the porch, where more often than not she found Logan, his eyes lost in the dark. On a hot Sunday, Lucy was making a stew, sweating near the stove, her hair tied in a loose bun, when she felt his gaze behind her. "Hot in there, isn't it?" Logan remarked, leaning on the doorway with an indecipherable expression. "The kitchen is always hot, but it yields affection." He stepped closer, lifted the lid of the pot, and inhaled deeply. "Smells good." She smiled without turning. "There's rosemary. You like it?" "I do. I remember. Not long ago you told Papa rosemary drives away evil spirits." Logan crossed his arms, looking at her as if seeing something he hadn't before, or had refused to. "And you believe that?" "I don't. No, but I believe the smell of food made with care drives away sadness." He didn't answer, just stayed there, like someone who didn't want to leave, like someone who maybe was beginning to find peace, in the scent of rosemary and the voice of a young woman who knew, without knowing, what it meant to care. It does drive it away. Too bad it doesn't drive away memory. Later in his room, Logan undressed slowly. The smell of rosemary lingered on his clothes, on his pillow. The sound of her voice clung to the back of his neck, and there was a restlessness in his chest. He was a man certain he had already loved, already buried, already closed the door. But now the door was ajar, and there was light on the other side. He sat on the bed, shirt in his hands, and murmured, "Little one." The word startled him. He wasn't the kind of man who used nicknames, but it had slipped out, like something that had been waiting to. The next morning, Lucy was making coffee, when she heard his voice behind her. "Good morning, little one." She turned, surprised. Her heart made a sound that didn't reach her lips. "Good morning," she replied, trying to sound natural. But her smile wouldn't fit. He took a cup, sat at the table, and began spreading butter on his bread. "It's colder today." "It is," she said, "but the kitchen's warm." He looked up. For a second, they looked at each other without hurry, without masks, without the sir and the foreman's daughter. The days followed like seeds scattered in the soil, some heavy, some light, all carrying the scent of change. Logan, little by little, was learning there were different kinds of silences. The silence that came with Clara's absence, and the one that formed when Lucy sat across from him and blew on her tea slowly. That second silence didn't hurt. It unsettled him. One night the rain came without warning. Lucy was hastily taking clothes off the line when a thunderclap made the sky shudder. Logan saw her from his office window and went down before thinking twice. "You're going to catch a cold like that," he grumbled, pulling at the sheet she was still trying to free from the wire. "It's fine. I'm almost done," she shouted over the pounding rain. But he was already there, wet too, his hair plastered to his forehead. He grabbed the rest of the clothes and together they ran for the kitchen. They laughed, or at least they did until they realized they were wet, soaked through, and alone. She took off her jacket and hung it on the chair. Her shirt clung to her body, outlining the slope of her shoulders, the curve of her waist. Logan looked away, pretending to dry his own arms with a dish towel. "I'll make tea," she said, trying not to shiver. "Good idea." The sound of the kettle filled the kitchen. The rain drummed on the roof like an old memory. They sat, both still damp, but close. He watched her brush the strands of hair from her forehead with the palm of her hand. She watched him watching her. "It's raining hard," she said. I like the sound of the rain." He lifted his eyes, and he saw, not the uniform of a girl who washed clothes and baked bread, but a woman of flesh, courage, and a quiet gleam in her eyes that disarmed even the roughest part of him. Something he didn't know how to name or didn't want to. Lucy. She turned her face. Yes? He cleared his throat. Forget it. But she didn't forget. Not her name spoken like that. Not the tone, not the look. She tucked it away in that part of the heart where we keep treasures no one knows we have. 2 days later, a strange horse appeared tied to the front gate. Logan stepped outside, hat still in hand, and found an envelope hooked onto the latch. He recognized the crest, the Bentleys. He opened it carefully, read in silence. Fancy paper, ugly words. It was a new threat. They claimed an irregularity in the succession. Contract. They would take it to court. They wanted a formal meeting. Logan drew a slow breath. It wouldn't be easy, but now there were 2 names at the registry, and he wasn't facing this alone anymore. They came here? Lucy asked, dishes in her hands. No, just left the message. They're going to try to take the land again? They are, but they won't succeed. She nodded, steady. If you want, I can prepare all the documentation for the lawyer. Get everything organized. He looked at her, and a faint smile tugged at his mouth. You've become more a part of this than you should, little one. I wanted to. No one made me. Logan narrowed his eyes. The way she'd said that, his chest felt too small to hold so much all at once. The nights went back to being a place to meet. Once a week, without planning it, she baked a simple cake, corn, orange, coconut, and left it cooling in the kitchen. He would show up, take a slice, she'd sit down. They would talk. One late afternoon, Lucy came into the kitchen, her hair still damp from a bath. She carried a new notebook, firm paper cover, smooth, smelling like a stationery shop just opened. Logan was at the table going through papers, but he looked up when he felt her presence draw near. I brought this so we can start a record, she said, stopping beside him. A notebook just for the recipes you like best. The ones I make here, that you always praise, even without realizing it. She smiled. That way, when you don't need me around anymore, you'll still be able to eat whenever you feel like it. He set the pen down slowly. The sentence hung in the air like the smoke from a candle just snuffed out. Are you saying you're leaving? I'm saying that when the marriage ends, she replied gently without drama. You won't have to forget the taste of good things. She pulled out a chair and sat beside him, opening the notebook. The blank page felt more intimate than a love letter. I can write it all down step by step, and if you want, I can teach you too. In case one day you miss the rosemary stew, or that rice with carrots and parsley you go back for, even though you say you're not a fan of carrots. Logan watched her hands. Steady, sure, already so used to the pots and the rhythm of the house. He took the notebook. When their fingers touched, there was a pause too charged to be just silence. Write down that tea you make at night too, he said without looking, directly at her. It tastes like home. She bit her lip, holding back a smile. Ginger and cinnamon tea. Learned it from my grandmother. But the way you serve it makes a difference. And what's the right way? With care. And with listening. Like you do when you sit here and don't say a word, but hear everything. This time he looked at her. Really looked. Like a man starting to realize that what seemed like only silence has sound, and a name, and a scent, and a presence. She lowered her eyes to write, and he stayed there, not sure he truly wanted that marriage to end one day. Write down the rosemary stew, he said, handing it back slowly. And the cornmeal cake you made Wednesday, that was dangerous. She smiled. Dangerous how? The kind of thing a man eats and then marries. She paused, but didn't answer. She only lowered her eyes and wrote with care. On a Saturday, they were both on the porch. Logan reading a cooperative report, Lucy knitting a small scarf as a distraction. You know how to knit too? He asked. My grandmother taught me. And who's that one for? Logan asked, eyeing the fabric spread across the table. She hesitated. Her fingers slid slowly over the raw cotton. I don't know yet, she replied with a faint smile. But it'll fit someone I like. He didn't say anything, but he looked away, and the silence between them shifted, as if the air had changed temperature. Later, in the smaller house, the scent of Corn cake still lingered when Helena sat beside her daughter, who had stopped by just to help fold a few clothes and ease the ache of missing her. "He calls you little one now, doesn't he?" Helena remarked. Lucy smiled, eyes on the floor, hands busy with the laundry. "He does. And what does that mean to you? That he doesn't see me as just anyone anymore?" She answered softly, but with something steady underneath. Helena nodded and took her daughter's hand. A simple gesture, one that blessed and also shielded. "Just don't forget that sometimes the name changes before the feeling does." "I know, Mama, but if the name changed, it's because something's changing." One night, Lucy was in the kitchen laying out a clean tablecloth when Logan walked in. He'd just come from the bath, his hair still wet, a towel slung over his shoulder. She stopped. So did he. "The table looks nice," he said, his voice low. "I thought we could have dinner here tonight. Just the two of us. Is it your birthday?" She laughed. "No, but it's Thursday." He looked at the set table, the scent of basil drifting from the pot, the simple candle in the center. Then, "Happy Thursday, little one." They had dinner. He ate slowly, complimented the meat's doneness, said the rice was cooked just right. She laughed. For the first time, he didn't seem like just the boss, or just the widower. He seemed like the man, and that made all the blood in her body move at a new pace. Later, when she said goodnight and headed for her room, he followed her with his eyes until she reached the end of the hall, and, without thinking, he said, "Lucy." She turned. "Yes? Thank you for all of this." She wanted to run and hug him, wanted to say she'd do it 1,000 times over, that all he had to do was want it, but she only smiled and walked on. He stayed, with an empty cup, a quiet kitchen, and a chest full of things he didn't know how to name. In bed, Lucy lay, down with her hair loose, the pillow scented, and her eyes open. The world was still the same, but now, she was Logan's wife. Even if it was only for show, that facade had walls, and inside them love was growing. And maybe, on the other side of the hall, someone else was still awake, thinking, feeling, unsettled, because that's how it begins. When love draws near slowly, like a noiseless step across the floorboards of an old house, the night dragged on like a heavy sheet of thick agile clouds. The wind slipped through the cracks of the big house, and Logan sat on the porch, boots firm on the floorboards, his hat resting beside him. The lamplight cast trembling shadows on the steps, and the sound of crickets filled the silence outside. Inside him, though, the noise was different. Lucy. It wasn't a presence that shouted. It was like a scent that lingers long after you think it's left the room, a gesture that returns, even after being forgotten, a memory of something that shouldn't even be remembered. She was in everything now, in the order of the jars in the kitchen, in the lavender scent on the sheets, in the note she had left the other day. "I mended the shirt with the tear in the sleeve, put it in the top drawer." He tried not to smile. He failed. Lucy was a son he had been trying not to look at directly. He had spent the last few days between the fields and the accounts, but numbers couldn't account for what he wanted to understand. When had begun to change? When had the silence between them stopped being empty and started being company? She cooked like someone who cares. She washed clothes like someone who thinks, and she ran her fingers along the laundry line as if she were tuning a guitar string. And he, who had never been one to notice, now saw, was starting to notice too much. That same night, Lucy was washing the last of the dishes. Warm water ran over her hands, and she smiled to herself. She thought about the way he had called her little one when she nearly tripped over the threshold. She thought about his eyes, which had once been opaque and now carried something alive. It wasn't an illusion. She knew what she felt, and she knew it was risky. But there was beauty in risking when your heart was sure. She dried her hands, took the new notebook she had bought in town, and hugged it against her chest. Her hair was still damp from her bath, pinned up carelessly. She wore a light, simple dress that draped well over her figure. It wasn't meant to impress, it was simply who she was. She stopped at the office door, where the light was still on. "Am I interrupting?" she asked softly. Logan looked up. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his hair more disheveled than usual, and his gaze seemed caught in the middle of something. "No, come in." She stepped in, still holding a dish towel in her hand. "I forgot to ask you. Tomorrow, do you prefer roast chicken or pot?" "Roast?" He furrowed his brow as if that wasn't just a casual question. Either's fine. Both are good when it's you making them. She bit back a smile, avoiding his direct gaze. Her eyes wandered over the cluttered desk, the scattered papers. There's too much here. Yeah, but today… He looked away for a moment. Today, it's easier to breathe. She took a step closer, hesitant. I feel different today, too. Different how? Like someone who belongs. Here, in this house. In you. Logan didn't answer right away. His silence had weight, like old wood. Then he stood, walked over to her and stopped close. Close enough for her to catch the scent of freshly pressed shirt and clean skin. Then stay, he said. She answered with her eyes. And there, without another word, he took her hand, as if he didn't want to let go. Later, he couldn't sleep. The sound of rain arrived like a soft drum on the roof. The lights went out. Blackout. He got up, slipped on his slippers, and left the bedroom. He found the kitchen lit by 2 oil lamps. Lucy was there, alone, making a simple stew. She turned when she heard him and smiled. The power's out. I noticed. I got hungry. Want some? He stepped closer. I'll take some. They sat down. The spoons clinked lightly against the plates, the rain outside like a background song. Lucy told a story from when she was a little girl, and he chuckled low. He couldn't remember the last time he had laughed like that. She stood to get a bit more food, and when she returned, their eyes met in a new way, as if the silence itself were pushing them forward. He touched her hand, lightly, but didn't pull away. Lucy let her fingers stay there. Her heart beat hard, but her face remained calm. Lucy, he said, her name coming out heavy with a mix of desire, fear, and something dangerously close to surrender. You have no idea what you're doing to me. She lifted her gaze to his, steady, unflinching. Then, tell me. Logan stayed silent for a moment, but it was a silence burning, ready to become words. I spent so long thinking my life was over, that all I had left was tending the land, keeping my head down and moving forward. But then you came into this house, into this arrangement, and everything started to change. She was breathing deeply now, but she didn't back away. You take care of me, Lucy, even without realizing it. With your hands, with your gentle voice, with the way you walk barefoot through the kitchen, and he stepped closer, slowly. I'm not fighting it anymore, because I'm tired of fighting what's already defeated me. She bit her lower lip, her eyes damp, but not with uncertainty, with certainty. I want you not out of pity, not because it's what people expect, but because I look at you and see everything I never even knew I needed. And I've always wanted to be that everything for you, she whispered. Logan came closer still, his face just a breath away from hers. Are you sure? With you, I always have been. The kiss came like the rain outside, expected, intense, softer at first. The surrender happened there in the middle of the night, the rain, the smell of food, and a love being born, and neither of them wanted to run. His hand found her waist with both firmness and respect. Hers rose slowly to his shoulder, feeling the tension the large body still carried. Logan was entirely there, yet something inside him still groped in the dark. Not for fear of the landscape, but out of the hesitation of not knowing how to tend to it. Lucy didn't rush him. She only looked at him, and in that look there was a silent invitation. You can. The kiss deepened. His hands began to explore with reverence the paths of the body she was offering him. It wasn't hunger. It was thirst for truth, and she was water. Warm, pure water, flowing through him without wounding. Logan rested his forehead against hers. If at any moment you want to stop, I won't want to, she said, her voice steady and sweet. I've waited too long to be here. With you. He took her into his arms and led her to the bedroom. Not the guest room, his room. The sheets smelled of soap and clean earth. The windows were closed, but the sound of rain filled every crack. His shirt was the first to fall. She ran her fingers over his chest as if memorizing that man by touch. Learning his geography in Braille, he undressed. Her with care, not as someone eager to remove, but as one who valued the ritual of revealing. When she stood bare before him, the air seemed to pause for a second. Logan drew a deep breath, not in raw desire, but in restrained admiration, as if saying, she's real, and she chose me. He laid her down gently, kissed her shoulders, the curve of her breasts, her stomach, as though giving silent thanks. Lucy trembled, not from fear, but from surrender. Every touch from him was a yes. Every glance, a promise. When they finally joined, it was like a sky clearing after months of clouds. The brief sting gave way to a natural fit, and their bodies spoke a language words could never reach. It was slow. It was deep. It was the joining of two stories marked by silences, now filled. Afterward, lying together, her head on his chest, listening to the strong rhythm of his heart, he ran his hand slowly through her hair. Lucy, I didn't think I'd ever feel this again. She lifted her gaze, her hair tousled, her face flushed but serene. Feel what? He took his time to answer. Peace and desire at the same time. She smiled, one of those smiles born only when the soul feels light. I never thought I'd feel anything, but since I was a girl, I loved you without knowing the name for it. He kissed the top of her head, a gesture of affection and also of admission. I don't know what's going to happen from here on, he confessed, but you have my respect. And now, you also have something I don't know how to name, but it's yours. She pressed her face closer to his chest. You're safe with me. The night went on, between the sound of the rain, the heat of their bodies, and the comfortable silence of two worlds that had begun to stop being two. The next morning she woke before him. She dressed slowly, picked up his shirt from the floor, and folded it with care. Looking at him asleep, she noticed his face seemed lighter. For the first time in a long time, Logan didn't look like a man at war. She left the room without a sound, barefoot, her heart full. She stepped into the kitchen and set water to boil. Later, he appeared in the kitchen doorway, his hair tousled, his gaze still hazy with sleep. You're up early. She smiled, turning toward him with a wooden spoon in her hand. I couldn't sleep much. I think my heart got too big to fit into a dream. He stepped closer, stopping behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist and rested his face against her shoulder. Then let's live awake, he murmured. And just like that, without ceremony, began what no one could call a facade anymore. It was the start of love with a name, a scent, and a skin. The days that followed passed in a new rhythm. Mornings came with the smell of coffee and a kiss on the neck. Nights, with bodies pressed close and breathing intertwined. The big house now held a different warmth, and it wasn't just from the stove. Lucy slept with her face resting on Logan's chest, and he held her as if protecting that body were part of the land's work itself. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, he would wake just to look at her and confirm that it was real. One afternoon, she was on the porch, braiding a new hammock she had found stored away, when he came up behind her. I'm still not used to seeing you like this, all beautiful in the sway of the afternoon. His voice was rough, low. She smiled, without turning. And how exactly am I? A woman, my woman. She set the cord down for a second, her heart racing in her chest. That sounds prettier than any nickname. And more dangerous too, he said, sitting beside her, their knees touching. Because now I know that loving you makes me want everything all over again. Lucy leaned in, her shoulder pressed to his, and she stayed there, just listening to the birds and the wind, with him, whole. That night, after dinner, she went to visit her parents. She arrived with a smile she could barely contain. Helena noticed before the door had even closed. Well, her mother said, folding her arms with that all-knowing look. You're different. Lucy bit her lip, taking a seat at the table. It happened. What did? Us, for real. Helena didn't ask. Are you sure? Or was it right? She simply came closer and took her daughter's hands. Did he respect you? More than that. He chose me, not just for the arrangement, but as a woman, with tenderness, with desire. Helena nodded, moved. And you? Are you happy? Lucy smiled with her eyes shining. Mom, it's more than happiness. It's peace. It's feeling like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. For the first time, he looks at me as if I'm everything, and I want to be. Helena pulled her into a tight embrace, her own eyes brimming. Then be. But remember not to lose yourself in the middle of it all. Love is addition, not blind. Surrender. I know. Lucy hugged her even tighter. But with him, I feel whole, not smaller. That same night, Logan was waiting for her on the porch. He had a blanket across his lap and 2 cups of tea cooling slowly. When she arrived, he smiled. Without realizing, he was smiling. "Were you waiting for me?" "Always." She sat down beside him. He pulled the blanket over them both. "Stay. Forever? For as long as you want to be mine." And she rested her head on his shoulder, saying nothing, because it already was. She was. They were. And time, which once hurt, now passed only with gentleness. The sun had not yet fully broken over the sky when Logan stepped down from the porch of the big house. Dew still shimmered on the grass, and the morning breeze carried the scent of damp earth and freshly brewed coffee. He crossed the field without hurry, but with a restless chest. He knew what he had to say, and to whom. Sebastian was in the corral, watching the cattle with that quiet way of someone who had always known more than he said. When he saw Logan approaching, he rested his arms on the handle of the hoe and waited, like a man who listens before the words arrive. "I need to talk to you," Logan said. "I'm listening." A brief silence. Only the distant lowing of cattle and the hiss of the wind against the fence. "I'm with your daughter," he began, straightforward as always. "For real. We've consummated it. Not because of a clause or a piece of paper. Because I wanted to, and so did she." Sebastian didn't react right away. He simply looked at the ground for a moment, then lifted his eyes to the face of the man who was now not just his boss, but his son-in-law, his daughter's partner. "And do you love her?" he asked without any frills. Logan took a deep breath, removed his hat, ran a hand through his hair, and answered with the steadiest voice he had. "I do, and it's not some whim from yesterday. It came slowly, without me noticing, but now it's here, carved into the bone." Sebastian nodded slowly, like someone who needed to hear it but had already known. "Then make sure you keep deserving her. Because Lucy, she loves with everything she's got. And when a woman like that loves like this, the fall of the man who breaks it has no end." "I know." Logan looked out toward the horizon, his eyes darkening a little. "I'm not going to break it, and I'm not running." Sebastian smiled faintly. Pride. Quiet. Contained. In his own way. Then he leaned back on the hoe handle and said, "Helena's going to be happy. She's been saying you've been lighter lately. More man of the house." Logan returned the smile, almost unintentionally. "She's right." 2 months passed like a season that didn't want to leave. Lucy now walked with her hair always loose, wearing floral dresses and an apron embroidered by her mother. Logan, once reserved, now left notes on the windowsills, brushed her cheek with the back of his hand, pulled out her chair at dinner, waited for her on the porch, all in silence but loaded with presents. Nights, which had once been nothing more than pauses, became reunions. "Going out?" he asked one morning, seeing her packing her bag. "I'm going into town to buy a few things. Fabric, buttons, maybe a gift for my father. He needs a new shirt." Logan nodded, though suspicious of the different light in her eyes. He didn't press. He simply handed her the Jeep keys. "Take it slow. If it rains, wait it out. I'll be back soon." She climbed into the Jeep with a smile tucked in the corner of her lips. He stayed on the porch, watching the dust rise on the road, his chest feeling a warning he couldn't quite name. On the 3rd day after Lucy's trip to town, the farm's peace was torn apart by the arrival of a black car. Out stepped Andrew and Michael Bentley, the cousins. Both wore light suits, as if trying to look too civilized for the smell of cattle. But something in their eyes betrayed the polish. It was raw arrogance, the kind that runs in the bloodline. "Logan," Andrew greeted curtly. "We need to talk." "Out here's fine," Logan replied, arms crossed, standing on the porch steps. "I'm listening." "You know your father's will ties things up," Michael began, his voice slicker than a bar of lye soap. "The clause is clear. Married and with a legal heir within 5 years of his passing. Otherwise, everything reverts back, and the deadline's getting close." "I'm married," Logan's voice was a growl. "That you already know, but you have no heir," Andrew countered. "And without that, there's nothing stopping all of this from being just a charade." "You think marriage is a game?" Logan narrowed his eyes, stepping down a stair. "That my life is a stage for your paper games?" "It's the law, Logan." Michael lifted a leather briefcase. "You can keep up the show for a while, but without a child, you lose everything. I'd rather lose this whole damn land than bow to 2 suit-wearing vultures who've never planted a single stalk of corn here." His tone rose, his shoulders set like a bull ready for a fight. The old Logan was there, stubborn, unyielding, ready for war. "Careful with your tone," Andrew said, his face flushing. "This isn't a threat. It's a warning." "I'm the one who gives warnings here," Logan shot back, dry as cracked earth. "And mine's simple. Get off my porch before I drag you off." Michael stepped forward but stopped when he heard footsteps on the side stairs. It was Lucy. A light dress, hair loose, eyes serene. But there was something new in her. A quiet strength, an unshakable certainty. She arrived without asking permission, stopping between Logan and the cousins. "You're here demanding an heir, aren't you?" she said. The cousins looked at her as if staring at some whim. Logan, on the other hand, froze. The whole world seemed to hold its breath. Lucy opened her bag and pulled out an envelope. "Here it is." She placed it in Logan's hands. It was a test. Blood work results, hormone levels. "I'm pregnant." Her voice did not waver. "Just a few weeks along, but it's already real." Logan read the paper, his eyes tightening with emotion. Then he looked at Lucy, and the world began to breathe again. A child, his child, with her. He laughed. A short laugh, but so full it seemed to echo across the whole field. His eyes filled, and without caring about the Bentleys, without caring about anything, he pulled Lucy to him by the waist and held her right there. "Are you sure?" he whispered. "Never been more sure," she answered against his chest. Michael swallowed hard. Andrew rubbed the back of his neck. "Then you two can choke on that will," Logan said, without letting go of his wife, "because this land has an owner. And now, it has an heir too." The news of the pregnancy spread across the ranch like a spring breeze sweeping through the drylands. Helena cried when she heard from her daughter's own lips that she would be a grandmother. Sebastian masked his emotion with a stubborn cough and a hug that said more than words. Logan, for his part, hid nothing anymore. The gruff man spoke less sharply, smiled more, and every time he looked at her, there was in his eyes the reverence of someone gazing at a miracle, or perhaps of someone who finally understood what home meant. Lucy moved lightly, as if within her grew not only a new life but also a new destiny. She prepared meals with more care, wandered through the pastures gathering rosemary and mint, and at night lay in Logan's arms as if every shared silence was a promise. He would rest his hand on the curve of her growing belly, enchanted. "I already love this boy more than I thought possible," he would murmur. "But I love even more the one carrying him." She would simply smile, her eyes damp with tenderness. The love she had felt for so long, hidden beneath 1,000 layers of waiting, was now an open, warm light that filled her from the inside out. The nights continued to be meetings, of bodies, of souls, of dreams. Logan would often return from work, sweaty, exhausted, but all it took was her touch, the smell of bread in the oven, or the sight of Lucy sitting on the porch with her hands resting over her belly, for the whole world to slow down. "Do you feel that?" she asked one night, guiding his hand to her stomach, and he felt it. A small movement, but brimming with life, like an answer, like a sign. He cupped her face in his hands, kissed her forehead with devotion, and said without ceremony, "You were the gift I never knew how to ask for." She closed her eyes and answered, pressing her forehead to his, "And you were the future I dreamed of without believing I deserved it." Time moved forward gently. On the morning Lucy went into labor, Logan was more nervous than cattle on branding day. He paced back and forth on the porch, hat crumpled in his hands, eyes full of worry. "Sit still, man," Helena scolded, though her own voice was thick with emotion. "I can't," he said, eyes wet. Hours later, with the sun high and the scent of lavender and cotton in the air, Lohan came into the world with a strong cry, full of life and promise. Logan held him in his arms as if the entire universe could fit there. The boy had his father's eyes, his mother's nose, and a stubborn tuft of hair that refused to stay flat. "He's everything," Logan whispered, kneeling beside the bed. "But you're still my whole world." Lucy, exhausted and blissful, cried silently, her fingers laced with his. In the days that followed, the big house became a nest. Logan began waking before dawn just to watch his son sleep. He kissed Lucy's forehead before heading to the corral, and left wildflowers on the window ledge without saying a word, just because. Lucy alternated between rocking her son in her arms and laying him in the crib, humming softly, and writing in a fresh-covered notebook everything she wanted to remember. The day Logan learned to change a diaper without putting it on backwards. The day he dozed off with Lohan on his chest and snored louder than the rooster. The day she caught him staring at their son with misty eyes. One afternoon, as they sat barefoot on the porch, Lohan sleeping in her lap, Logan took Lucy's hand and said, "You know what I've learned from you?" "What?" "That love has no rush. It comes, puts down roots slowly, but once it blooms, nothing can pull it out." She didn't answer. She simply squeezed his hand and rested her head on his shoulder. "I used to think loving again was betraying what I'd lost," he went on. "But now I understand that loving you is giving a future to what I lost." She smiled with her eyes closed and said, "And you were the gift the past never had." Outside, the sun sank behind the hills, and its golden light touched the porch as if blessing everything it reached. The ranch went on, alive as ever, but inside that house, there was now a home, and within that home, a love story that began by chance, endured by choice, and bloomed by destiny. I have completed the full translation of the text you sent. So what did you think of this story? If your heart also beat a little faster for this unexpected love, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss a single story like this one. Tell me in the comments, do you believe love can be born from the most unlikely of places? Your participation in the comments helps the channel grow and inspires me to keep bringing you stories that move you, give you chills, and make you dream. I'll be waiting for you in the next video.